I worked 3 jobs to buy my own condo. Then my family demanded I let my sister live there rent-free. When I refused, they broke in, even tried to sue me. What came out in court ended every lie they'd told. I'm 27 years old, and my family tried to destroy my life because I wouldn't let my sister move into my one-bedroom condo. It started at that old kitchen table, the one with the chipped edge from our childhood, when my mother looked at me and said, "You're making your sister feel like a failure." Her eyes were cold. Her smile was kind. And that was the moment I realized love in my house always came with strings. But they had no idea what I'd do next. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. The kind of betrayal that doesn't leave bruises, just silence and shame. Because what happened next wasn't a fight over space or money. It was a war disguised as love. I grew up in a house where image meant everything. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where lawns were cut on Saturdays, and gossip was traded like currency over cracked driveways and church potlucks. My mother, Marianne, was obsessed with what people thought. Always smiling too wide, always talking about how blessed we were. My father, Dennis, worked long hours at a car parts warehouse and never argued. He believed silence was peace, but silence was just the sound of surrender. We weren't rich, not even close. Our walls were thin, our furniture mismatched, and our heater coughed all winter. But every December, Marianne would max out her credit cards for matching sweaters and a family photo shoot in front of rented fake snow. Every Christmas card had the same caption that reads, "A grateful family." Even as a kid, I knew it was a performance, especially when the camera turned off and the yelling began. Chloe, my sister, was 2 years younger and born with that kind of sunshine charm people can't resist. Big blue eyes, a giggle that filled rooms. She could break a vase and somehow make me apologize for it. Once when we were 8 and 6, she threw her cereal bowl at me because I wouldn't give her the red spoon. It hit the wall, cracked, and left a chip on the edge of our kitchen table. I remember Mom rushing in not to check if I was okay, but to pull Chloe into her arms. "Julian, don't provoke her," she said. "You know how sensitive your sister is." That chipped edge is still there. I saw it again years later, the day everything finally snapped. By the time I was 13, I'd already figured out how our family worked. Chloe was the golden child, Mom's mirror image. I was the steady one, which was just code for invisible. At 16, I started working pizza shop after school grocery store on weekends and summers, at the library shelving books until closing. Every dollar I saved went into an envelope labeled college fund tucked inside my sock drawer. When I told Mom I was saving for tuition, she smiled sweetly and said, "That's wonderful, honey. You should learn the value of money." Then she handed Chloe $200 for a cheer camp in Florida. That was the first time I realized love could feel like punishment. College wasn't glamorous. I went to a state university an hour from home because it was the only place I could afford. My dorm smelled like burnt noodles and broken dreams. I lived off ramen, cheap coffee, and freelance graphic design gigs that paid $20 a logo. I never took spring breaks, never went on trips. Meanwhile, Chloe was dropping out of her 3rd major and posting beach selfies with captions like, "Finding my path." Mom always defended her. "She's just creative," she'd say. Not everyone's meant to take the traditional route, and every time I'd come home for the holidays, there'd be a new story about Chloe's latest passion. Baking, yoga, essential oils, crystals. Each lasted just long enough for my parents to brag about it on Facebook before quietly fading away. They called her our dreamer. They called me our rock, but being their rock meant getting crushed under their weight. When I graduated, I didn't invite anyone. I crossed the stage alone in a borrowed gown, the sun blazing hot on my neck. They hadn't offered to help, hadn't even asked what day the ceremony was. I sent them a picture afterward, me holding my degree, smiling because I had to. Mom replied with a single text. "So proud." Chloe's thinking about culinary school now. Maybe you can help her reply. That was the moment I stopped expecting anything from them. Still, I tried to stay polite. The dutiful son, birthdays, holidays, Mother's Day cards. I showed up, smiled, played my part in the family play because that's what good sons do, right? They keep the peace even when it's killing them. Years later, after landing my first real job as a marketing strategist, I bought a 1-bedroom condo near downtown. It wasn't fancy, just clean lines, quiet neighbors, and a view of the river if you leaned far enough out the balcony. I didn't buy it to show off. I bought it because for once, the roof over my head belonged to me. Every inch of that space was earned from the thrift store couch to the mattress still on the floor. When I finally invited my parents over, I thought maybe they'd be proud. Instead, it felt like an interrogation. Mom walked through the place like she was touring a crime scene. "It's cute," she said, finally looking around. "A little cold, though. Don't you want something more cheerful?" My dad asked about the mortgage, not to congratulate me, but to analyze. "That's a big step," he said. "Hope you didn't jump in too fast." Chloe tagged along, sunglasses on indoors, scrolling her phone like she was allergic to real life. She didn't say a word until she was halfway out the door. Then she smirked and said, "Must be nice to have no life so you can afford this stuff." Mom laughed. Dad chuckled. And I just stood there holding the door open, wondering if success was always going to feel like failure in this family. 2 days later, Mom called. Her tone was sweet, the kind of sweet that makes your teeth ache. "Julian, I think you need to be careful," she began. "You're making your sister feel like a failure." I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. "You've always been so independent," she continued. "It's intimidating. Chloe's still finding herself, and you flaunting your success isn't helping." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Flaunting, Mom, I made sandwiches. That's not exactly a victory parade." "You know what I mean," she said sharply. "You don't have to rub it in," is what she understands her. And how would my thing of the mass I didn't argue? There was no point. But something inside me cracked that day. A hairline fracture I didn't know would split wide open later. That call was the start of the slow unraveling. At first it was subtle little comments, hints, suggestions that I shouldn't talk about work too much around Chloe, that living alone must be lonely, that maybe I'd be happier if I had someone to look after. Then came the not-so-subtle part. "Would you consider letting Chloe move in, just for a few months until she figures things out?" I remember staring at the phone, my coffee going cold in my hand. It wasn't a request. It was a setup because in my family, generosity was never free. It was a leash. I stalled. Said work was busy, that I needed to think. I hoped they'd drop it. But Marianne Reed never drops anything. She circles, she waits, she finds another angle. And she did through guilt. A week later, a text from Chloe. "Hey, Mom said you're cool with me staying a bit. When should I move in?" No question mark. No please. Just entitlement dressed up as casual. I replied, "I never said yes. I don't think it's a good idea." She didn't respond. 2 hours later, Mom called, voice trembling with fake disappointment. "Julian, I just don't understand. Why wouldn't you help your own sister?" "Because I like living alone," I said quietly. "Because I worked for this, and I need space." "She's family," she snapped. "You've always been so selfish." I hung up before she could finish. And just like that, the quiet war began. The calls didn't stop after that. If anything, they multiplied, little reminders disguised as concern. "Your sister's going through a hard time," Mom would sigh. "You have so much space." I'd glance around my 600 square feet condo and wonder if she was serious. Then she'd lower her voice like we were plotting a secret. "You don't want people to think you've forgotten where you came from, do you?" That line always hit its mark because growing up she drilled it into me. Gratitude, loyalty, image. To her, boundaries looked like betrayal. I tried to reason with her at first. I offered to help Chloe with rent somewhere else, to even co-sign if she found a studio. Mom brushed it off. "Why waste money, your family?" I wanted to say, because peace of mind isn't a waste. But you can't explain peace to someone who's never lived without chaos. When I was a kid, I used to sneak out to the front porch late at night just to breathe. The house always felt too loud, not in sound. But in expectation, I'd sit under that buzzing porch light listening to cicadas, telling myself that one day I'd live somewhere quiet enough that I could actually hear my own thoughts. I got that place now, my condo, my sanctuary. And suddenly the same people who taught me to survive noise wanted to invade my silence. Thanksgiving came that year, like a test I didn't study for. I almost skipped it, but guilt is a powerful leash. When I arrived, the house looked smaller. Or maybe I'd just grown out of it. The chipped kitchen table was still there. Same scar from that cereal bowl, same faded placemats. The smell of burnt rolls and too much perfume hit me as soon as I walked in. Chloe was setting the table, humming off key to Christmas music that was playing a full month early. "Look who finally decided to show up," she said, smiling like it was a threat. Hi to you too, I said, hanging my coat. Mom appeared, apron dusted with flour, smile rehearsed. Julian, sweetheart, you look thin. Work too hard, don't you? Just busy, I said. Maybe if you had someone at home you'd remember to eat. She teased. Chloe laughed. Yeah, like me. I froze. The air went still. Mom's eyes flicked up, daring me to challenge it. I didn't. I never did back then. Dinner was polite torture. Every conversation was a booby trap. If I talked about my job, Mom said I was bragging. If I stayed quiet, Chloe called me distant. Dad drank his beer in silence, the referee who never blew the whistle. When I finally stood to leave, Mom hugged me too tight, whispering, "Don't be stubborn." Julian family sticks together. Her tone wasn't warmth, it was warning. December rolled in cold and gray. I worked late most nights, partially because I had deadlines, but mostly to avoid going home to unanswered calls and guilt-laced voicemails. Then one Friday evening, I came home and found something that made my blood freeze. Boxes. 2 large cardboard boxes stacked neatly by my couch. Women's clothes, a blanket, and a framed photo of me and Chloe from years ago. My key still worked. The locks weren't broken. But someone had been inside. At first, I thought maybe I'd lost my mind. Maybe I'd agreed to something and forgotten. But then I saw the post-it note on the counter. Thanks, big brother. Mom said I could come by any time. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the note. I called my mother immediately. Did you come into my apartment? Her voice was syrupy calm. I told the manager it was an emergency. You weren't answering. I just helped Chloe bring her things over. You had no right. Don't raise your voice at me, she snapped. You left us no choice. She needs family right now. You'll understand one day. My pulse roared in my ears. This is breaking and entering, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. You're being dramatic, she said softly. We're family, not strangers. That word again, family. A shield, a sword, and a leash all at once. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, staring at those boxes, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. The next morning, I changed the locks. Digital keypad. This time, I texted Mom. If you or Chloe try that again, I'm calling security. Her reply came fast. You're sick. You need help. No one treats their family like this. That message stayed on my screen for hours, a threat disguised as concern. For a while, things went quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no messages, no visits. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then one morning, I walked out to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single photo. Me sitting in a cafe near work, staring at my laptop. On the back, written in perfect cursive. You can change the locks, not who you are. I remember the taste of fear metal and bile. I called the building office, demanded to see security footage. Miss Patel at the front desk promised to check, but her eyes said she already knew more than she could tell. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. Every creak in the hallway sounded like a footstep. Every hum of the elevator felt like a warning. A week later, my manager called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, eyes darting to the glass walls like someone might be watching. Julian, he said, clearing his throat. I received an anonymous email about you. I felt my stomach drop. He handed me a printout. Words jumped off the page. Unstable, aggressive, unfit for teamwork, possible side projects during company hours. The language was flowery, too polite to be real, too familiar. I'd seen that same style in every holiday card Mom ever wrote. I forced a laugh, but my hands were cold. He sighed. I don't believe it. HR looked into it. Nothing there but just a heads up. Thank you, I managed to say. I walked back to my desk. My reflection ghosted in the glass somewhere. My family was watching me drown and enjoying the view. A few nights later, Derek, my college friend, came over. He dropped his backpack on the floor and said, "You look like hell." Family stuff, I said. He frowned. Your mom again? I nodded. He shook his head. Man, you need to start documenting this. Don't just survive it, record it. That sentence changed everything. From that day, I started keeping everything: screenshots, voicemails, texts, dates, photos. Not for revenge, not yet, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. It was around that time I met Tessa. She was in HR visiting from another branch. Cheerful, but sharp in a way that cut through pretense. We bonded over burnout jokes and terrible coffee. She noticed the dark circles under my eyes before I said a word. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," she said. "I'm just dealing with family noise." She nodded knowingly. Noise can be louder than shouting. We didn't talk about it again. But from that day, every time I got another anonymous message or a guilt-laced voicemail, I'd replay her words in my head. One night, I went back to that chipped kitchen table. Not physically, but in memory. I could still see the cereal stain the crack in the wood. The moment my mother had told me, "You're making your sister feel like a failure." Back then, I'd swallowed it. Now I understood what it really meant. You're not allowed to outgrow us. That was their rule. Stay small so they can stay comfortable. But something had shifted in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for standing tall. I didn't know it then, but that quiet decision to stop shrinking would set off everything that came next. The lawsuit, threats, the lies, the invasion, the revenge. After that winter, my family turned silence into a weapon. Weeks passed without a single word from them until one Sunday my phone buzzed with a calendar invite. Dinner at Mom's, 6 p.m. No text, no question mark, no, "Can you come?" Just a command. I should have ignored it, but guilt still had its claws in me. When I walked through the door, the smell of overcooked roast hit first, followed by Chloe's voice. "Well, well, look who finally forgave us." "I never said that," I replied quietly, taking a seat. Mom smiled too sweetly. "Julian, don't start. Let's just eat." Dinner began as small talk, but the air thickened with subtext. "So Chloe," said between bites, "I found this cute apartment, but the landlord needs a cosigner. Thought maybe you could?" "No," I said before she could finish. Her jaw dropped. "Excuse me." Mom's fork clinked against her plate. "Julian, I'm not co-signing anything." I said, "I'm not responsible for her choices." "You're her brother," Mom snapped. "Do you even hear yourself?" Dad muttered something about not ruining dinner, but his voice drowned under Mom's righteous fury. "You used to be kind," she hissed. "Now you're just cold." I looked at her across the table, the chipped edge of the wood catching my eye like a scar that never healed. "Maybe I finally learned it from you." That ended dinner. The next day, my phone lit up with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "Aunt Linda, your mother is heartbroken. You've changed Cousin Jake. Man, just help your sister. Family is all we have." Every message carried the same script guilt wrapped in sympathy. I could almost hear Mom's voice behind each one. That's when I realized she'd started a campaign. A week later, a letter arrived, thick envelope, embossed seal. Inside, legal letterhead, "Grant Wexler, attorney at law." The letter accused me of intentional infliction of emotional distress for abandoning familial duties and denying temporary shelter to an immediate family member in need. It was so absurd, I almost laughed. Almost. Then I read the last line. "Our client reserves the right to pursue mediation or legal action if matters are not resolved amicably." I called Samuel Ortiz, an employment lawyer I'd met through work, and read the whole thing aloud. He snorted halfway through. "This isn't a lawsuit," he said. "It's theater, but keep it. We'll call it Exhibit A, manipulation in writing." He told me not to respond, not to take the bait. "They want you emotional. Stay cold." I hung up feeling both relieved and sick because my own mother had just tried to sue me for saying no. I didn't speak to them for 3 weeks. Then one night I came home to a faint smell of lavender, not my detergent, hers. I checked every lock. Everything was still sealed except the balcony door. The latch was slightly off, like someone had closed it too softly. My stomach dropped. On the kitchen counter lay a mug with lipstick stains. Next to it, a photo frame that used to be in my old room at their house. They'd been inside again. Security footage the next day showed Marianne at the front desk smiling, clutching her purse. Miss Patel said she'd claimed it was a medical emergency. She'd signed the visitor log in her careful cursive. Marianne Reed, access to 17B. My unit was 12B. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lie when she knew no one would question because she looked like every polite suburban mom who would never do something like that. When Miss Patel showed me the footage, I felt something shift inside. Not anger, clarity. They weren't trying to reconcile. They were escalating. I started noticing more small things. A voicemail from Dad, voice slurred with quiet regret. Your mom just wants to talk. A church friend of hers sent me a Facebook message that said, praying for you, family is precious. Even my boss received a concerned email from a parishioner claiming I was struggling with mental instability. All signed anonymous, all written with the same tone. It was like being haunted by someone still alive. The next Sunday, another envelope appeared under my door. This time, no photo, just a folded note in purple ink. You can change the locks, but you can't lock out family. Stop before you regret it. It wasn't unsigned. It said, Mom. That night, I sat in my dark apartment. The city hummed faint through the window and realized this wasn't about Chloe moving in anymore. It was about control. They couldn't stand that I'd built something that didn't need them. And in their eyes, independence was betrayal. I opened my laptop, created a folder named Read Incidents, and dragged every piece of evidence inside. Photos, letters, messages, screenshots. It felt like building a case not in court but for my sanity. And as I sat there watching the files pile up, one thought settled like ice in my chest. They think they're winning because I'm quiet. They don't realize silence is the sound of strategy. I didn't see Chloe again until early spring. I was heading home from work when I spotted her outside my building leaning against the mailbox in a cropped hoodie scrolling her phone. My chest tightened. She looked up, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Hey, big brother Chloe, I said flatly. You can't be here. Relax, she said, brushing her hair from her face. I just wanted to drop something off. She handed me a small USB drive labeled Tax Docs. I didn't take it. What's this supposed to be? Proof Mom's right, she said, her smile twitching. You've changed. You think you're better than us. Then she stepped closer, eyes shining. You used to care, Jules. When did you turn into this? Her tone cracked on this like she was auditioning for sympathy. I didn't answer. I just walked past her into the building, keying the door shut behind me. When I looked out the lobby window, she was already taking a photo of my car. That night, Derek called. She's posting again, he said. I opened my phone and saw at a brand new GoFundMe titled Starting Over Emotional Abuse. Her story was a fever dream of lies. Her brother kicked her out, isolated her, made her feel worthless. There was even a picture of a suitcase one I recognized as mine from a photo she took years ago. In 12 hours, it had raised over $2,000. I felt something between fury and disbelief. It wasn't just about money. It was narrative theft. She was weaponizing my silence. By Monday morning, my inbox was full again. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. You should talk to your sister. She's hurting. This is sad. Julian, don't let pride ruin family. Every message was another brick in the wall. She was building a wall where I was the villain and she was the survivor. I went to Ortiz's office that afternoon with my folder. He scanned through the screenshots, the legal letter, the building footage request. He whistled softly. They're getting reckless. That's good for us. Us, I asked. Us, he repeated. You're not crazy. You're being harassed. Collect. Don't react. You're winning when you're quiet. Days blurred together. Work became my refuge. But even there, their ghosts followed. One afternoon, my boss, Avery Lynn, called me in. Julian, she said gently, it traced that anonymous email from last month. I felt the world tilt slightly and she handed me a printed report. The sender IP belonged to Street Matthews Community Church Wi-Fi, my mother's church. The email was sent during their board meeting hours. Avery watched me closely. Do you want HR involved? I shook my head. Not yet. She nodded, sliding the papers back into the folder. When you're ready. That night, I stared at the report for a long time. The line between faith and control had finally snapped. They hadn't just violated my space. They tried to take my reputation. The next blow came from an unexpected place, the building management office. Miss Patel called me in quietly, sliding a clipboard across the counter. I think you should see this, she whispered. It was the log from the night my apartment was entered. Marianne Reed, emergency access to 17B. She pointed at the note beside it. But your unit is 12B. So she lied. I said. Miss Patel's voice dropped. We're tightening access rules because of this, but you might want to speak to legal. That night, I poured myself a drink, opened every folder I'd kept, and started organizing. Emails, timestamps, screenshots, the GoFundMe timeline, even the metadata from that creepy cafe photo, every lie, every threat, every manipulation. I lined them all up on the floor like puzzle pieces, somewhere between page 10 and 11. I stopped shaking. A week later, my father called. It was late, his voice gravelly. Your mom's upset, he said. She says you're collecting things, making her look bad. I didn't answer. He sighed. She's not all wrong. You know, family shouldn't fight like this. I almost laughed. Then maybe someone should have told her that before she broke into my house. Julian, I'm done. Dad, there was silence. Then he said something so soft I almost missed it. I can't stop her. You know that. And I did. He'd never stopped her. Not once. A few nights later, Derek came by again, dropping 2 beers on the counter. You good? He asked. I think so, I said. I'm starting to see the pattern. What pattern? They only love you when they control you. He nodded slowly. So what's next? I looked down at the stack of folders. Proof and then distance. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. It wasn't peace exactly, it was preparation. Because deep down, I knew they weren't finished. Not until they thought they'd won. But what they didn't know was that I'd stopped playing defense. I wasn't scared anymore. I was studying them. And when the time came, I'd use every lie they told as a blade sharpened in silence. There's a moment when exhaustion turns into clarity. When you stop hoping the fire will die out and start learning how to control the flames. That moment came for me. The morning I walked into the conference room at Northbridge Strategy with a folder labeled Cease and Desist. I had spent weeks building it, everything documented, every line cross-referenced. Emails, logs, screenshots, camera footage, GoFundMe transactions, even the metadata from that creepy cafe photo, every lie, every threat, every manipulation. Now it was time to set it free. Ortiz met me that morning with his usual calm. You sure you're ready for this? I nodded. He opened the folder, scanned the letters one last time, then looked up. This isn't about revenge anymore, it's about reclamation. I smiled faintly. Revenge is just clarity in motion. We sent 3 separate cease and desist letters that day. One to Marianne Reed, one to Chloe Reed, and one to Grant Wexler, the family's so-called lawyer. Each was tailored, precisely backed by exhibits and timestamps. The letters weren't angry. They were surgical, cold, factual. By noon, they had been emailed, couriered, and certified. I went back to work and didn't think about it for the rest of the day. But that night, as I poured a glass of whiskey and stood by my window, I saw my phone light up, unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared moments later. It was my mother. Her voice was calm, too calm. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said. Dragging your own family into legal nonsense. You'll regret this, Julian. You always do. Then a soft laugh, brittle at the edges. Do you think anyone believes you? You've always been dramatic. Click. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt nothing. 3 days later, the dominoes began to fall. The first came from Miss Patel in my building. She called to say the board had reviewed the security footage using the emergency access key for the wrong unit. They filed an incident report effective immediately. She was banned from entering the premises again. The second came from the church board. My uncle Peter Hale had followed through on his promise, quietly leaking the legacy file we'd assembled about the old inheritance forgery. It wasn't public, but it spread like wildfire through the congregation. Whispers, suspicion, a silent implosion. Mom's carefully curated image of the perfect matriarch began to crack. The third domino hit the hardest. Chloe's GoFundMe was frozen pending verification. The platform's fraud team had received a 22-page report, anonymous evidence backed airtight. Within days, her account was locked and donors started asking questions. Screenshots of her inconsistencies began circulating online. One follower commented, Didn't you say your brother lived in Texas? Now you're saying Chicago. Another posted, this story doesn't add up. And then the quietest victory of all her affiliate brand partnerships started dropping. One by one, her pastel-colored empire of healing energy and family trauma recovery evaporated overnight. But the universe wasn't done with poetic symmetry. The same week, Chloe's brand began collapsing. Wexler, the lawyer who had sent me that absurd emotional distress threat, received a professional ethics complaint not from me but from Ortiz, backed by evidence that he'd filed documents containing false statements. It was minor, but enough to stain his reputation in their small-town legal circle. The letter I'd received months ago, the one that once made my handshake, was now part of his disciplinary file. I didn't have to lift a finger. Then came the last confrontation. Quiet, unplanned, and almost cinematic. It was raining the night they showed up at my building again. I didn't realize it until Miss Patel buzzed me on the intercom. "Julian," she said, her voice careful. "Your parents are in the lobby. They say it's important." I almost told her to send them away, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, said, let's finish this. When I stepped into the lobby, they were waiting. Mom stood by the elevator umbrella, dripping eyes hard but desperate. Dad lingered behind her, silent as always. "Why are you here?" I asked. She smiled tightly. "We just wanted to talk. Family to family." "You lost that privilege when you broke into my home," I said. "You've turned cold," she said softly, shaking her head. "All this paperwork, these letters." "You mean the evidence," I interrupted. Her eyes flashed. "You think this makes you strong? It just makes you cruel." I stepped closer until we were face to face, separated only by the wet air between us. "You've mistaken silence for weakness my whole life." I said, "You taught me that family means surrender, but I learned something better." Her breath hitched. "What?" "That freedom is louder than forgiveness." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stared at me, lips trembling, like she couldn't recognize the sun standing in front of her. I turned to Miss Patel. "Call security if they don't leave." Then I walked away. The next morning, my inbox was flooded again, but this time not with hate. An email from Avery Lynn. "My manager Julian, your report on brand ethics got noticed by corporate. Let's talk promotion." Another from Tessa. "Short but warm. Proud of you. Coffee later." It felt like stepping out of fog into sunlight. For once, the noise wasn't mine to carry. A few days later, I mailed one final envelope. Not to my parents, not to Chloe, but to myself. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notarized request for a legal name modification. Julian or Hale. The Reed name had been a cage. Hale was the echo of my freedom. When the confirmation came through, I stood by the window of my apartment watching the rain streak the glass and whispered, "You don't get to hurt me anymore." It wasn't anger, it was peace. The kind that hums quietly, steady as breath. After the confrontation, I thought I'd feel victorious. But victory didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence. The kind that stretches for days, echoing through the places they once occupied in your mind. I moved through life quietly, almost cautiously, waiting for another attack that never came. Instead, there was stillness until one morning I got an email from GoFundMe's compliance team. Case concluded, refunds processed, account terminated. It was official. Chloe's story, the poor sister abandoned by her cold-hearted brother, had been deemed fraudulent. No drama, no headlines, just gone. 2 days later, I checked her Instagram. The account was blank. All those tearful videos gone. The pastel filters, the healing energy, the sympathy donations erased in less than 24 hours. And right then, I understood something deeper. Revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just deletes. Meanwhile, the church board voted to temporarily relieve Marianne Reed from her leadership duties. That was their polite way of saying she'd been asked to step down. She didn't post about it, of course, but word spread fast. In a town that thrived on image, silence was its own scandal. The whispers I used to fear were now her burden to carry. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a thing because the truth didn't need defending anymore. It was standing on its own, unshakable, inevitable. Instead, I focused on building my new life. A month later, I sold the condo, moved 2 hours north to a riverside apartment near Northbridge's East Division glass walls. Clean lines, quiet mornings. I changed my number, my email, my nameplate at work. Julian R. Hale. It felt strange at first seeing that new name printed on my ID, but the strangeness turned into something beautiful: ownership. For the first time, my life belonged only to me. One night, while unpacking boxes in the new place, I found the old Read Incidents folder. I held it for a long time. Then, instead of burning it, I sealed it in an envelope marked Legacy. If they ever came back, if they ever tried again, I'd be ready. That was my quiet revenge. Not fire, not fury, preparation power. Because sometimes the sharpest way to win is to walk away so completely that they can't even find the battlefield anymore. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like no matter what you do, you're the problem, hit subscribe, because stories like this aren't just mine, they're yours too. Sometimes the hardest revenge isn't shouting or fighting or proving them wrong. It's learning to let go, walking away without looking back, and living so well that your silence becomes the loudest truth of all. This story isn't over. Not really, because healing never ends. It just gets quieter. And that quiet, that's where freedom begins.